Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie v Cards, and in this video I want to talk about the young players in Major League Baseball and whether or not their slow start should be concerning. So I'm back. I have been gone the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I moved across the country, so I'm in Kentucky now. I sold my old bookshelves, bought some new bookshelves, so it's a work in progress on what the background is going to look like. So this could all change here soon. The sound and lighting is poor because I don't have the lights anymore, and I have to figure out a new microphone stand. So it'll get better, but thanks for watching the videos. So let's just talk about today's video, which is about these young players in Major League Baseball. You have Soto, Acuna, Vlad, Wander, tons of other young players who just aren't really having a big year. We have players like Mookie Betts, Paul Goldschmidt, a couple other veterans that are really performing really well. And it kind of makes you wonder, the last few years we've seen a lot of the talent trending from older players to younger players. And now we're seeing it go from younger players to older players again. Now they're playing better all of a sudden. So in this video, I want to discuss some of these younger players and whether or not we should panic with their sports cards or if they'll be just fine due to underlying statistics. So the very first player let's talk about is Juan Soto. The reason I want to talk about Juan Soto is because he's not having that bad of a year. Yes, he's not having a Juan Soto-esque year that we've gotten accustomed to since 2020. The last few years he had an MVP 5 finish, MVP 2 finish, and as of right now, he's really not having that bad of a season. We can see his on-base percentage is below 400 for the first time in his career, but that has trended up basically game after game after game. He's putting it together, and actually his OPS plus of 153 is higher than his OPS plus was last year at the All-Star break. So even though it's not happening the same way, offense as a whole across the league is down, he's still putting up a 153 OPS plus, which is better than Mookie Betts, which is better than a lot of really great players because offensively he is just so good at getting on base, and ballpark factors obviously are in play here, but also because league offense is down in general. He is still walking significantly more than he's striking out, 73 walks versus 54 strikeouts, and he is on pace for 5.7 WAR. I would not be surprised if he ends up with 6 to 7 because he's really playing better as of late, and he's generally a second half player. So nothing to worry about with Juan Soto. The weirdest thing with Juan Soto, however, is just the fact that he sucks defensively this year. He's actually 50th out of 50, dead last out of all right fielders defensively with -7 outs above average. That is not good. That's actually very bad. And you can see over here as well, out of 274 qualified hitters, he's number 266 defensively in outs above average. Last year, he was the 6th best right fielder. Now he's dead last. So really big step back. If he could be a defensive player that's average this year, probably be worth 3.5 to 4 WAR, but because he's only an offensive player essentially as of right now, that's why he's at where he is. This is his StatCast percentile rankings this year versus last year. The biggest difference is in sprint speed, outfield jump, and outs above average. The defensive metrics basically and sprint speed, those are all down quite a bit. Everything else is pretty close. His average exit velocity is not as high, but that will go higher as he starts crushing the ball when it heats up in the summertime. After that, we have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He is having a very interesting season. It's not a bad season, but it's definitely not a good season. He's on pace right now for about 4 WAR, which is respectable. All-star level is 5 WAR, so right at or below all-star caliber level, which is really good for a 23-year-old, but it's just a big step back from where he was last year as the MVP runner-up. He's not on that level. Probably won't even be top 10 MVP voting if it ended today. Obviously, you can turn it around. I'm not too concerned because he is 23. We forget how young he is. But overall, he has a 266 batting average, an 829 OPS, and a 132 OPS plus. This is more similar to 2020 Vlad than 2022 Vlad. So if you have a lot of his cards, it can be a little nerve-wracking, but I'm not too concerned about him yet. He's still looking good offensively, and he's figuring it out. In the beginning of the year, his road and home splits were crazy. So I decided to put his road and home splits in this video because they've actually become basically level. He's still better on the road by a decent margin, but at home he has more power, but he gets on base less with a lower batting average. Makes me wonder if he can't see the ball quite as well off the batting eye. But either way, he's kind of fixing that issue that he's had historically from previous seasons. But overall, he's still not playing that great on the road or at home. 834 versus 824 OPS. He can do better. We all know that. I wouldn't be too concerned because he had a rough start to the year and he's starting to play better again himself, just like Soto. But either way, long-term, Soto at least is looking a little bit better with his on-base percentage at 400, while Vlad is only at 346, and his slugging has dropped significantly, which is why this OPS is so much lower. Also, percentile rankings, I just wanted to show that Vlad has actually really improved his defense. I've always been critical of his defensive numbers, but he's played well defensively. He has 2 outs above average for a first baseman, which is fantastic. That's top 5 first baseman defensively. If he can keep that up, he adds so much value to his current game, especially if he can continue to get figuring out his bat, I think he'll be just fine. Next up, we have Ronald Acuna Jr. Surprisingly, Ronald Acuna Jr., even though he was an all-star starter, and on top of that, he was the one National League player to get the most votes, he really isn't having that big of a year yet. He has 1.4 WAR right now. He only has 8 home runs. If you look at his slugging percentage, it's a .434, which is almost 100 points lower than his lowest before, and it actually is more than 100 points lower than his career average. On top of that, we can see down here at the sprint speed, this is 2022 percentile rankings versus 2021 percentile rankings. His sprint speed has dropped quite a bit. He's coming off of an ACL tear. I don't know what people really expected from Acuna. I expected this because he's figuring it all out again. He's finally getting back into baseball. If you can tell, he's just not really getting the ball in the air. So if we look over here, his ground ball percentage is higher than it's ever been. His fly ball and line drive percentage is lower than it's ever been. And that just means more outs. He's just not slugging. And once he figures that out, I really think he'll be just fine. But to have this guy have so much pressure after tearing his ACL at age 23, coming back at age 24, and expecting a 7-8 WAR MVP season was just kind of out of the realm of possibility anyways heading into this year, even though a lot of people really expected that for some weird reason from Ronald Acuna Jr. So either way, he is not having a big year, on pace for 4.2 WAR, but I think he'll be just fine in the long run. Even if that means he is better in his age 25 season, I think he'll be fine. It's just this year's not his year because of that injury. He's figuring it out. He rehabbed. He'll be fine as well. Then we have Tatis Jr. I would say he's the one player I'm most concerned about on this list, whether it's justified or not, but he actually is just barely or hasn't even started swinging yet. So this right here, this article from ESPN, I couldn't find much more information about his injury, but San Diego Padres Fernando Tatis Jr. expects to swing bat in 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks ago, so he should be starting right now. And on top of that, 2 days ago, you'll see that there was a potential position change from shortstop to center field in Tatis' future. That's not great because a lot of his value came from being a shortstop. Yes, center field is a premium position as well, but if you had a player like Tatis at shortstop hitting 40 to 50 home runs, that's awesome. Leading the league in home runs and a lot of other things. I think they're worried about him diving, hurting his wrist more, continuing to hurt himself on the field. So that switch to the outfield, whether it's center field, right field, or left field, doesn't matter. It'll keep him on the field, and the best ability is availability. And I think they're realizing this with Tatis. So it is concerning in regards to his values because he was one of the best shortstops in baseball, if not the best shortstop in baseball. And so going from shortstop to an outfielder, just like Acuna, Soto, Trout, Betts, all these other great players, does hurt some of his value in my eyes. And on top of that, he hasn't even played this year. They expected him to start playing at the end of June. He hasn't taken swings yet. So I bet the end of July, maybe early August, he'll be back. Maybe later, depending on what happens with his recovery. Then we have Wander Franco. He had a lot of hype heading into this year. Number 1 prospect in baseball, basically was called the best prospect since Mike Trout type thing because he was so good in the minor leagues, and he's not been good this year. He's been hurt. He's actually on the IL right now because he broke a bone in his hand, and he'll be out for probably 6 to 8 more weeks. That's 2 months worth of no Wander Franco, and his card's getting printed like crazy. People are selling like crazy. A lot of the high-end stuff just not selling for what it was because of the crash of the market, and on top of that, him being hurt. It's just tough to be a Wander Franco collector. But if there was ever a guy I would speculate on for some decent cards, I would consider Franco because they're going to get so low, in my opinion, here soon. And I think personally he'll be fine. His actual overlaying numbers don't look that good. So this is all just a personal opinion. All of this video is a personal opinion. But you can see his average exit velocity is not super high. His WOBA is pretty good, actually above average. He's just not barreling up the ball. His whiff rate is great. His K rate is great. His sprint speed is well above average. His expected batting average is actually one of the highest in all of baseball, and he can still crush the ball as a switch hitting shortstop. Max exit velocity is in the 86th percentile, which is really good. We can see his expected batting average is a 303 batting average based off of launch angle, how hard it was hit, and so forth. That doesn't take into consideration the shift, which is probably why he's getting hurt as a lefty. You can see here, as a lefty, when he's hitting against right-handers, he's hitting 247. As a righty hitting lefties, he's hitting 302. Probably for that purpose. But you can still see he's hitting currently 260 this year, while that's a 40-point difference in expected batting average and his actual batting average. So for Franco, I think he'll be fine. If you have a lot of Franco cards, I recommend not selling right now. If they go down a little bit more, it is what it is. But if he comes back and plays hot, you'll be so mad you sold. It's just one of those things. If you need the money for groceries or gas or your family, totally makes sense. But if you have the ability to hold, you might as well ride this one out because I think there is up from here, but who knows? They'll probably drop more before they bounce back. Because he's out for 8 weeks, we'll look at Julio Rodriguez, we'll look at Bobby Witt, we'll look at Jeremy Pena, we'll look at Seiya Suzuki. All these other rookies are having having better years than Franco is right now. He's not a rookie technically, but either way, I would not panic with Wander Franco. One thing I want to point out is a lot of baseball players who are superstars have these struggles, who debuted early and have a down year. You can see Bryce Harper won the MVP in 2015 as a 22-year-old with a total of 9.7 WAR. This is WAR right here. This is batting average, on-base slugging, OPS, OPS plus. The next year went from a 198 OPS plus to a 114 OPS plus. That's a huge difference from 9.7 to 1.5 WAR. Everybody panicked on Bryce Harper. I still think he's doing just fine because he's figured it out, and that's just kind of what happens when you're young. Mookie Betts had a much better age 24 season than Manny Machado did, for example, but he went from 9.5 WAR with MVP 2 to a 6.4 WAR with the MVP 6. That's still a 3-point drop in his WAR. Then we have Manny Machado, who is 7.5, 7.3 from age 22 and 23, and then 3.8 as a 24-year-old with WAR as well. So my point is, it's okay for players to have down years, especially if they're young. Don't panic, because if they have a down year, it's not a huge deal. A lot of players will have ups and downs until they get older where they're more consistent. This is the age where there's more variability in these players' stats because they're figuring out, the league's figuring them out, and on top of that, they're just young. Only players I would really worry about right now is Tatis personally, just because he hasn't played this year. Position change, maybe his wrist really isn't better yet. If you want to worry about Franco, that's fine. I'm personally not. You have Ronald Acuna Jr. I knew this was kind of coming when people were expecting huge things. He will have a good second half, in my personal opinion, and he'll have a good age 25 season. So if you want to pick some up, that's up to you. His cards still aren't that low yet, but I expect them to drop lower if he continues to struggle, even though he did make the All-Star team. Vlad, kind of a wild card. If he can continue to figure out how to get back to his 2021 MVP form, MVP runner-up form, I should say, with his newfound defense, he has huge WAR potential in his future. And with Juan Soto, he's actually having a good year, and people are just overreacting because his batting average is a little bit lower than they think it should be. So anyways, those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree with my takes. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next video.